Patreon heroes, and welcome to the LarpHouse Patreon exclusive experimentation tutorial things. I know it's been a hot minute, so here I am with the sort of experimentation video of how I made Momo O'Brien's witch hat from scratch. Normally, when you make a hat out of felt or wool, you start with a hat block, so I am using the wooden hat block method, where you just sort of take a felt hood, heat it, stretch it over the hat block, stiffen it with fabric stiffener, trim it, all that stuff. Usually these hat blocks are made of wood, but hat blocks can really be made out of anything so long as it is waterproof, watertight, and not porous. So, you know, I'm gonna start making my own. And I just have a Lazy Susan here with PVC pipe stuck to some paper with paper clay. I'm going to create the basic shape of this hat block with expanding foam that I got at the hardware store. So I'm starting with the base. I'm making the sort of lip, I don't know, brim of the hat. So I'm starting wide. And what I learned pretty quickly is that you have to do it in layers. You have to wait for it to dry and expand, and then do the next stage if you're doing a tall shape, because this stuff will it will droop. It will expand and droop at the same time. And so, because I am an adult and I learned from my mistakes, I'm doing it a little bit at a time after that initial pancake tomfoolery. I'm just making it way bigger than it needs to be at this point, just so I have plenty of area to work with here. This is my wonderful helper, Melanie. We're attempting to carve the shape with a super sharp knife here, but it became apparent fairly quickly that was not going to be fun for anyone. So I just started attacking it with an electric handsaw, and that worked quite beautifully. Electric handsaws are just, I love mine. I love it so much. Definitely worth the money. And, you know, I sort of thought to go with a slight classic Gandalf lean to the hat in one direction. I can't remember whether it was a decision I made out of necessity because something was off-center, or it was a conscious decision, but we're just gonna go with it was totally on purpose. When in doubt, it was intentional. I just carved that down as much as possible. Now, it's about time for the next step. So what I am using here, it looks like paper clay, but it is actually a sort of semi-magical substance called scratch. If any of you guys are familiar with the Meow Wolf sort of weird theme park, it's in New Mexico, but scratch is something that they sort of developed for their theme park that once it dries, it's water-based, it is fireproof and weatherproof and all this crazy stuff, and it's very light. And the cool thing about it is that if the surface that you are sculpting on top of is porous, it bonds with it really well. They talk about how it's a similar technology to wasp nests and why wasp nests are so good at sticking to things they have no business sticking to. So I'm covering the basic block shape with that stuff. You start out with the soft scratch, and once you have the soft scratch on there, you can top it with harder scratch. There are two different kinds. The harder scratch is the more sturdy kind, obviously, and the softer scratch is made specifically to bond better to the surface, so it's kind of like a primer. But I like this stuff because you can just use water to smooth it out, and if you just use the soft scratch, it has the benefit of being not still soft when it dries, but you're able, like, it's not rock hard. You can poke like a push pin into it, which actually became very useful later on in this process. So I'm just at this point, you know, covering the base, getting my taps on, just using a spatula to even it out even more. Putting it on a lazy Susan was extremely helpful, as you can see. And this is what it looks like once it's dry. If I'd had a little more time, I might have put a single coat of resin on it, but I didn't. So I did not do that. Putting a plastic bag over it actually worked just as well, and like I said earlier, it still allowed me to put push pins in it later, which was helpful. Now what I'm doing here is soaking the material that I bought in some hot water. It needs to be wool based so that heat will make it expand, but if it's too hot, it'll make it shrink, so don't cook it. And I'm gonna tell you right now that this loosely woven wool blanket, you know, $12 on Etsy, is not the same as an actual wool felt hood used for millinery. So I would probably actually buy a proper felt hood were I to attempt this again. But if you are on a super budget, or if you don't have a lot of time or whatever, this ended up working acceptably. And the next step is a little bit tricky since you don't have a whole lot of time before the fibers cool down and become less pliable, but you want to wring out your fabric and stretch it over your hat block as much as possible. And with a shape like this that is so conical and pointy, that was a lot trickier than it sounded. You know, you do your best. I ended up having to cut a seam along the hat to get the proper shape, but it's fine. Get your cat in for some moral support, so you can enjoy the illusion of not being alone. Yeah, and here's the cutting of that seam, because there was also a lot of excess fabric, so I had to cut that away. I apologize that it is super conveniently turned exactly away from the camera in the opposite direction. And then I started putting in the push pins. I can't stress how grateful I am that I was able to put push pins into this particular hat block that I made. Just keep pinning and stretching and pinning and stretching, and it comes together. Adding some rubber bands just to keep the base from sliding upwards. And here I have a fabric steamer, and I am just using it to really stretch out those crinkly bits. And I wasn't sure how much it was going to work since this is pretty loosely woven wool rather than the actual felt, but it ended up working actually rather nicely. It really helped sort out those crinklies. Get your pin pushies on. I used so many. And have your cat join you for a snack. Yeah, I just continued to steam it and pin it until there were as few crinkly bits as possible. And the next step, which I don't have a actual video bit of for some reason, but I literally just take a chip brush or just any brush and paint on fabric stiffener. And you really don't need a lot. I thought I was going to need a lot since this is not a proper felt hood, but I didn't. This is what it looks like after I have painted on literally about 12 more ounces of fabric stiffener than I needed. And after that, it's a simple matter of taking it off the hat block with a good old foomp and trimming the edges. Yeah, I don't like. I can't bend it.
Oh god.
Yeah, that's the crunch of like a stale baguette right there.
We tried the whole train thing. The train thing. You're really excited. What was the password? I found money. What?
Congrats.
Yeah.
Gross. That's bus crack money.
Found in the bus crack. It's five Canadian?
Grazi?
What's Grazi?
Wizard money.
It's
I don't know.
money.
Is it? It is wizard money then. So in the end, even though it wasn't perfect, I finished it. We brought it all the way from California to Poland, and it served its purpose. Momo O'Brien had nothing but good things to say about it, and even though you could absolutely use this thing as a battering ram, I have to admit it did look very, very cute on her. So that's it for this time on the Patreon exclusive LarpHouse experimentation videos / tutorials. The next video will be how I made my fiber optic light up wand for College of Wizardry. And that was a ton of fun to make, so I'll see you then.